12 through this character, Zinaida, who is the Odysseus that I created. Thank you. Zina invited Varenka to have a picnic by the grave of her grandma in Tayirovsky Cemetery, the third largest in Ukraine. They flagged down a Volga, she sat shotgun, and soon the 3-story buildings had turned into apartment towers before falling away to a road straddled by the yawning steppe. The open landscape surrounding Odessa remained always so peaceful, even in archival photographs of the slaughter of the Great Patriotic War. Zina packed lunch, toasted bread, and feta cheese wrapped in tinfoil. Bored, Varenka opened his window. Alyosha, the driver, said, "Don't," and shrugged. Even though it had only been a shrug, a mere shrug, Zina knew that it was a threat as she counted the crows on the power lines striping the road. When she was small, she would hold her hand up as a long blade, leveling everything they passed. A building that resembled a barracks, an outhouse, its door open, light peeking in. "Remember the outhouse thing at Trumbull Dome?" Valenka reminded her. Our outhouses are better," she told him. The outhouse braced against the wind. Alyosha explained how he hated both the new government and Russia. The separatists were losers. A quick shower came down while the sun shined on. Alyosha recited what sounded like an Abramovich anecdote. Ukrainians say when the sun shines while it rains, it means the devil beats his wife. His cell phone rang and he answered, "Yes, my beloved, I can't talk." As they tooled up to the second gate into Tayirovsky, she asked Alyosha to stop the car. There was the start of a dusty chartreuse gravel road. She waited as if listening. Unlike many parts of Odessa and Ukraine in general these days, there were no guards at Tayirovsky. What was there to guard? She listened and listened. From the corner of her eye, she saw Alyosha making gestures at Varenka. She turned around in her seat and reached out to touch Varenka on his knee, a move she knew would capture his attention. "Go, dear, and buy Grandma some flowers there." She nodded toward other people's grandmas sheltering beneath a tin portico. Even from the car, the bouquets of larkspur, hollyhocks, and snapdragon were visible. Valenka went and did what was asked of him, while she remained mute in the car next to Alyosha. When Valenka returned, she asked how much he had paid. Alyosha laughed at the price. "They swindled you." She turned to face Alyosha. "Here they swindled him. In America, it's trifles." "Why in America?" Alyosha asked. Instead of answering, she stared at him for a moment before she turned her body to face Valenka. Valenka tried to explain. "I think they said 33, but then she saw me go for my wallet. Or maybe she saw my shoes. She didn't look me in the eyes. When I held out 33 hryvnia, she said, 33. I said 303. Alyosha grinned with his mouth open and watched her, waiting for commiseration. She did not give it to him. She continued to attend to Valenka. "Here is some penny tray advice. Get it, take or leave." Valenka had no Odessan response. She continued, "Take what you get in life. Everybody gets scammed. They rip off each other in their own way." As she led Valenka further into the cemetery, the women who had ripped him off began singing in high nasal voices, more like keens than entertaining song. The singing voices carried the repetition of a melody. The women chanted, cut themselves off, began again. This wail demanded only silence. It was the same way the trees, branches, and leaves demanded silence. It was the same way the stone did. These natural objects, these women, they demanded very little from people. Silence was the least one could do. The late morning sunlight ushered Zina and Varenka further. The grass and weeds growing out of her dead ancestors, and Varenka's as far as he knew, appeared to shrink from the brightness. The air hummed, faded with rain. They moved on foot over the dusty crunch toward the sea of graves. The ground sounded wrong to her. The keening of the women sounded as if it were becoming louder, coming closer. Valinka could not see her face as she plunged forward, sweat pouring down her cheeks. Her sobs could be written off as panting. They passed a grave with a metal picnic table. Valinka stepped over to it and flattened his body across the metal, which clanged underneath him. On his belly, he put his arms out as if he were a parachutist. He must have been trying to impress her, show that he could be as wild and irreverent as she. "Get the fuck off of there," she said in a whispered shriek. He obeyed, hopping up and standing before her. He glared at her as much as she at him. "What, you'll say something?" He bowed. "Come on," she said. There are several wells along the little roads of Tayierovsky. These wells helped mourners orient themselves there. She led them in the direction of the third well, from which she knew to go until the sixth row. Prisms of light sprung up from the gravel as if it vibrated with the unheard voices of the dead. Groaning black ironwork gates partitioned some plots. Some were curtained by listing weeds, cross-stitched by mute choke vines. Her ears began to swell as if somebody was talking about her somewhere else. She could sense that behind her, Valinka was avoiding the anxious shapes of black iron. She could hear his mind observe that, other than a few Jewish and fewer Muslim plots, it was mostly an Orthodox Christian cemetery. He was probably used to Catholic cemeteries. In Tayierovsky, there were no blessed virgins, no mothers around to cry. Once they turned at the third well, the path became a small snake of bald earth floor, tapped out in the otherwise grassy soil of the steppe. The speed at which they moved, the wind of the path, urged them along. It felt to her as if they were running away. During a previous visit, she had heard her papa speak to her grandma's grave. As if he thought the wind there would sweep his words away and she would not hear, he said, "Zinashka is so much like you, Mama. She's the best thing I ever made in my life." That was what magnetized the tears to the brink for her. She moved faster so that Valinka couldn't catch up and see her face, hear the little keens, same as those of the hags at the front of the cemetery, mixed in with her somewhat labored breathing. When they reached the grave, instead of telling Valinka, she stood in profile to him. She said, "You can't continuously renew your visa. When you must leave, will you do like other Americans, other Westerners? After you leave, will you ghost me?" "Ghost you," he said. "I feel as if you ghost me every day." She used a Reiki hand maneuver to dismiss that theme of conversation, but he persisted. "I'll say no, but I know words are trifles, no matter how close they come to the truth." While he was trying to speak profundities, a flabby fly heckled him from a point in the air above. She, the fly, lit off like the tail of a pen stroke. Zina said, "The advice of Abramovich: in order to kill a fly, aim behind her. All flies back up a couple steps before departure." "I was trying to speak to you about truth," he said. She took a bottle out of her bag and set it on the grave as if clinking with the stone. "We're here?" he asked. "I should have carried the bag." With a shrug, she said, "You know who impresses me? There is a woman from Belarus, part Ukrainian. A Russian writer called her a lesbian kike. She's not a Jew, and I've never heard about whether she ate pussy or not. I like what she does. She wrote about the 90s, about Afghanistan, about Chernobyl, but she writes using others' voices. Only she doesn't do it the way others do. She writes based on recordings, done on a little cassette probably. She edits them, but some of these voices of real people are incredible. Whether from her or the people she records, that's truth." For truth, she used the word istina instead of what Valinka had used, pravda. "What's the difference?" he asked. "Is istina more spiritual? Pravda is factual." "Yes, probably," she answered. "There's a third too. Huistinavda." "You don't have to explain that one to me," he said. "I got it. Dick truth." "That one's for you," she said. Tears, sobs, they had fled from her eyes, from her entire face, with a morbid grin and chuckle. Without taking her glance from him, she pointed. "This is the grave of my grandma. She was a tough woman. She was quiet and very strict. Like my papa, she didn't know how to joke. At her paternal grandmother's deathbed, Zina had told the woman how she had a crush on one of her classmates. Baba Liza had told her that whether or not he liked her, everything would be all right. Only it hadn't been a he. It had been a she on whom Zina had a crush. Zina had not corrected Baba Liza, at whose grave she knelt now. Babushka, I want to introduce you. This one, he's my boyfriend. I have a boyfriend from America. The leaves rustled, dust slid in silence. The silence was interrupted. Yelizaveta Tikhonovna Bondarenko, thank you that you made Zina's father and that he made her. He stopped when she put her finger over her lips. She moved it to his lips and pressed. You, what a fucking joke, she said. That's stupid. She turned to him, ready to say that she couldn't love him because he annoyed her, because they were so different, too different. Between she and Varenka were two big differences. She picked up the bottle of ready gift and gulped from the neck, long and slick, slopped her hand across her lips, and made as uncultivated a growl and burp as she could. Even though this gesture was unpleasant, made her wince with the pinch of the vodka in her throat, she did it. She swallowed the vodka, and with it all of Odessa, all of Ukraine, all of the Black Sea. It had the same stinging bitterness that stayed in the mouth, that burned itself into feeling, that sucked her dry and threatened throbbing pain in the future. She savored this feeling. The vodka said to her, it could be worse. I taste good right now. It's gonna get worse. So drink up, pal. If she spoke what she wanted, acted the way somebody between the two continents where she had lived would, she would cry. If there was anything her grandma taught her, it was never to give a centimeter. She and Varenka were two different waves of the Black Sea. Papa said this place was perfect for his mama. She loved the garden. It is the garden of people here. She narrowed her eyes. It's probably exactly like gardens in America. When he inhaled to speak, she said, don't say it's not. It's all the same. It's all the same, he said. Of course, it did not sound the same. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to say,